I'm Ankit and you're watching the Indian Express analysis of 20th of February. Now, in today's discussion, we'll be covering 5 important articles for the day. And as you can see, these are the articles. First, we'll be discussing about the Insurance Regulatory Authority of India, that is IRDAI. And this is a statutory body. Therefore, it becomes important from which part of the syllabus? It becomes important from GS paper 2 syllabus. Although it deals with economic related issue, that is the insurance sector, but the statutory bodies are covered in GS paper 2 syllabus. Understood? Then we'll be understanding the challenge that RBI is facing currently, whether to let rupee depreciate or not, or whether to control its depreciation by using the money in the forex reserves of India. So this is a perpetual dilemma that RBI is facing, and there are many articles these days in the newspaper. First, there was set of articles that highlighted that indeed RBI should let the rupee depreciate as it will help India's exports become more competitive. But today's article, it states that we cannot let the rupee depreciate by any amount, because although we want to become a key exporter country, but many of the raw materials which are used in India, particularly crude oil, these are imported from other countries. So as a consequence of rupee depreciation, our imports will become expensive, right? So this is a cause of dilemma, that whether to let rupee depreciate as it will promote exports, but whether to control depreciation so as to make imports cheaper. This is the dilemma that RBI faces. So we'll be discussing our today's article in this regard. This is important from GS paper 3 as it deals with the external sector of economy, which is there in the economy section. Understood? Then we'll be understanding the pardoning powers of president, particularly with the emphasis on powers of remission, which is actually reducing the sentence of any person. So we'll understand many of the pardoning powers of the president, which is provided under which article of the constitution? Under article 72. And as this is a part of polity syllabus, therefore it becomes important from which part of the syllabus? From polity syllabus. Understood? And then we'll be understanding the next article. It is about can or whether or not whales are able to gulp the entire human beings into them. Now this article appeared yesterday's newspaper, but we'll be discussing it today as it provides us some of the key elements of different types of whales which can be important for our UPSC's perspective. Understood? So this will be a syllabus part from particularly GS paper 3 as it deals with species in news. Then we'll be understanding our final discussion on India-Qatar relations, as the Emir of Qatar or the ruler of Qatar, he was on his official visit to India, and with his meeting with Prime Minister Modi, there was this slew of agreement that was signed between these two countries. So we'll try to understand the significance of Qatar for India, and also why is Qatar an important geopolitical player in the Middle Eastern part of the region. And we will also discuss the various areas of cooperation between these two countries, in addition to understanding the challenges that the relations between these two countries face. Okay. So these will be our today's article of discussion. The last article, as I told you, belongs to the IR part of the syllabus as it deals with India's relations with other countries. Now, as usual, the notes for the session will be available on my Telegram channel, ATS Live. So please, after the session ends, make sure to go to this channel and subscribe it, and also download the notes which I make available immediately after the session ends. Good evening, Augustine. Good evening, FTY, Baga Springs, Anchal. Good evening, everyone. Now, before moving with our today's discussion, let us try to solve the practice question. In essence, what does constitutional morality mean? Now, we discussed constitutional morality. This is a morality which is propounded by the philosophies and the beliefs of the constitution. Understood? So, if you have any doubt in the constitutional morality, please let me know in the comment section. For that, we should solve the question, does constitutional morality means unquestioned adherence to the constitutional provisions? No, I told you constitutional morality also means reason. That does not mean you unquestionably adhere anything, but rather you use your own reason to adhere anything. It follows majority opinion in governance, and again incorrect. It prevents these majority opinion from becoming the norm, and it tries to balance it with the elements of justice, equality and fraternity. Understood? It relies on historical traditions for decision making, again incorrect. So the correct answer, it becomes upholding the spirit and values of the constitution. Option B here is the right answer. Yes, Amar, you're right. Now let us move to the practice question. This will be the practice question that we will be dealing with today. This question is actually about India's relationship with Qatar. So we'll be first understanding the various aspects of India's relationship with Qatar, then we'll try to understand or how to approach this question. Now let us begin our today's discussion with the first article of the day. This article actually appeared in the business section of the today's newspaper, which is today on page 19. Now this article highlights that IRDI, which is India's insurance sector regulator, it has formed a 7-member committee under the chairmanship of a former chairman of SBI to review insurance sector reforms. Understood? So this is the context of the article. Now it has formed a high-powered committee led by Mr. Dinesh Khera, who was earlier the chairman of SBI, India's largest public sector bank, and this committee will scrutinize various aspects of Insurance Act 1938 and suggest amendment so as to make regulation in the insurance sector much more effective and efficient. Now the IRDI, it has moved, or this move has come at a time when Indian government is considering whether to extend 100% FDI in insurance sector or not. So that is why you need slew of regulatory reforms so as to make the sector enable, or to enable the sector to get foreign investments from it. Understood? Now in this regard, what becomes important from our exams perspective actually is the nature of this IRDI body, what are its composition, what are its powers, etc. Now let us deal with that. IRDI is actually a statutory body because it was formed under an Act of Parliament, IRDI Act 1999. The headquarters of this body, unlike many financial authorities which are located in Mumbai, IRDI is located in Hyderabad, which is the capital of Telangana. Now the ministry under which this IRDI functions is Ministry of Finance, particularly Department of Financial Services. Now this Department of Financial Services also is responsible for implementing scheme as Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. So please remember this particular department. Now the composition or the numbers of members in this IRDI, it includes 10 members. All of them are appointed by the central government. It is led by a chairman. It consists of 5 whole-time members and 4 part-time members. And all of them are nominated by whom? By Government of India. Now, what does this insurance sector regulator actually do? First of all, it grants licenses to insurance companies and intermediaries so that before beginning or coming into insurance businesses, they need licensing. Just like banks need licenses from RBI, insurance companies need it from IRDI. It also protects interest of the policy holders because you understand the policies which are sold to the policy holders, they need to be protective of the policy holders without hiding them from the caveats. So that is why in case of any grievances that the policy holders might have against the insurance company, they can always approach IRDI for the same. And it also regulates the investment of the funds. You understand, insurance companies, they handle a large amount of money which is given to them by customers in form of insurance premium. Now how this money is invested in any sector of the economy, that determines first of all the profitability of insurance companies and also the need of investment in various sectors of economy. So you can understand these insurance companies, both Indian, globally, they invest in many projects across the world. So this body is also responsible in regulating how these investment companies and insurance companies make their investment decision. So also the professional organizations who are connected with the insurance business, their also investment criteria, these are determined by IRDI. Now it also undertakes inspection, conducts investigation on any grievances that has been filed by customers, especially against these insurance companies, and it also adjudicates the dispute between insurers, intermediaries, and also the intermediaries of the insurance sector. So if any two companies get into a dispute, who is going to resolve them? That is IRDI. Please remember that. Now, which are the entities that are regulated by insurance companies or IRDI? First of all, these are life insurance companies, both public and private sector, companies like LIC, etc. These are regulated by IRDI. Also, general insurance companies. You have to understand India's insurance sector, it is divided into two different categories. First are life insurance companies and another one are general insurance companies, also known as non-life insurance companies. So, both these category of insurance companies, these are regulated by IRDI. Also, there are many companies who provide insurance to insurance companies. Okay, so these are known as reinsurance corporation, one of which is GIC or RE. Understood. So this is also regulated by IRDAI in addition to agency channels and intermediaries like corporate agent, brokers like Policy Bazaar, etc. All of them, these are regulated by IRDAI. Now let us solve the practice question with reference to IRDAI. Consider the following statement. It is a statutory body under the jurisdiction of Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Incorrect. It is under the jurisdiction of Finance Ministry. Now the headquarter of IRDAI is situated in Hyderabad. Correct. It regulates investment of funds by professional organizations connected with the insurance business. Yes, I told you these insurance companies and intermediaries, they have large section of money, and how they invest it, it is determined by IRDAI. So second and third statement become right. First was incorrect, and we have to identify correct statement. Option B, only 2 is the right answer. Good evening, Arya. Good evening, Malu bhai. Good evening, Ankit. Good evening, Gibson. Good evening, Ashil. FTY, yes, you are right. Option B is correct. Shweta, you are also right. Now let us move to second article of the day. This article appeared in the op-ed section of the Indian Express newspaper, that is on page 13. Now there's a very good aspect about Indian Express. What I like specifically is that it gives opportunity to every kind of an argument. That otherwise in different newspapers you will see there are only one sections of people who belong to one particular ideology, but Indian Express is good in this regard because it provides opportunity even to contradict something that the newspaper has followed, right? And this article today highlights the same. The author of this article is actually an economics professor of JNU, and he has disagreed with the stand of Indian Express, as Indian Express earlier had said that government should actually let Indian rupee depreciate because it is good for our exports. But this article actually highlights that this is not the right way to do it, because if we let our rupee depreciate, it might blow us back in form of making our imports much more expensive, right? So this is the context of this article. That the editorial, it argues that the RBI should let the rupee depreciate, the editorial of Indian Express, and intervene only to prevent excessive volatility. However, this particular article that we are going to cover today, it says that the extent and speed of this depreciation is very uncertain, and it could lead to self-enforcing cycle, which further leads to the depreciation of rupee, as there will be capital outflow, which will further weakening the Indian rupee. So this is what the article today cautions us against, that we can't let Indian rupee depreciate, because otherwise this will lead to a cycle of depreciation. When Indian rupee becomes weak, it will lead to outflow of foreign currency from India, which will further weaken the Indian rupee. Understood? This is the vicious cycle today's article is talking about. Now, first of all, we have to identify the reasons based on which Indian currency, or any currency for that matter, actually appreciates or depreciates. Now, after 1990s, what we have seen is that Indian currency, it became a markedly determined exchange rate system. That is, earlier RBI used to regulate the number of currencies in the market, and based on which the value of rupee was determined. So earlier it was a controlled form of exchange rate. But after India got liberalized in 1991 onwards, what we saw that the value of rupee became to be driven by market forces, that is the supply and demand factors. So that is why the difficulties and dilemmas that India faced due to economic crisis in 1991, RBI decided to make India's exchange rate market determined, that I have already told you. And India's capital account, it was opened up for larger global context, which allowed foreign investors to freely invest in India, and even if they decide to take out these investments, they were allowed to do so. So that is why whenever their investment came in, it led to inflow of dollars into India, and whenever their investments went out, it led to outflow of dollars, and that changed the value of Indian rupee. Understood? Now, since the opening up of our market, we have seen that the value of Indian rupee has not actually fluctuated, but rather it has gone down on a trajectory which is based on the inflows and outflows in general. So this is what the article is saying, and on the whole, except a brief period, what we have seen that the long-term trend of the value of Indian rupee with respect to foreign currencies like dollar, we have seen that Indian rupee has actually been on a track of steady depreciation. That earlier when India, or in 2011 or so, what we saw that the value of rupee, or value of rupee per dollar, it was about 45.56 in 2011 and 2010 and 12, and now it is more than 86. It highlights it was 82.78 in the financial year 2023 and 24. So from this trend we can gauge that the value of rupee has actually depreciated. For now that we have to buy every dollar, we are required to shell out twice the amount of money or Indian rupee that we were required to about 15 years back. So this is the steady trend in value of Indian rupee, that it has witnessed steady depreciation. Understood? Now, good evening, Divyansh. Now, the market determined exchange rate, it is, or the fundamental depreciation of Indian rupees because of primarily two factors. First of all is that India is a developing country, and because India is a developing country, the prevailing inflation rate in India has been on a higher side as compared to developed countries like US and UK. And because of this inflation, steady inflation rate in India, what we have seen that the purchasing power of Indian rupee in domestic market, it is depreciating because of inflation. You can understand, for example, the value of per kilogram of sugar was 40 rupees, and if you had 100 rupees to spend, you could buy how much kilograms of sugar? 2.5 kilograms of sugar. But what if due to inflation the value of sugar rises to 50? Now you will be only able to buy 2 kgs of sugar. So this highlights that because of inflation, the purchasing power of Indian citizens, it is reducing, and also because of the fact there are prevailing inflation, so you are required to shell out more amount of money for imports, and this leads to further inflation. So this is a cycle that, first of all, due to inflation your purchasing power reduces, as I have told you here, and because of this reduction in purchasing power and large monetary supply of Indian rupee, there will be depreciation of Indian rupee vis-a-vis the foreign currencies, and as the rupee will be depreciated, it will raise the prices of our imports, which will further promote inflation in India. And because of this very inflation, what we have seen that rupee in general context has depreciated over a period of time. Now, the second factor this article highlights that has led to depreciation of Indian rupee is that India is net importer of the goods. For example, India's exports in general, which brings dollar into India, it has been less than imports, and that is why India is required to buy much more dollars in order to finance its imports, which leads to depreciation of Indian rupee, because our demand for dollar is high, which requires that when the demand of dollar is high, the prices of dollar go up, and naturally with comparison to that the prices of rupee goes down. And as India is a import dependent country, for imports we are required to shell out dollars, and this has created the area where the rupee is depreciating. Now, despite India is one of the largest remittances, or India is one of the largest recipient of remittances from the nation or from different countries, even despite this fact, India's trade deficit or current account deficit becomes quite high, and India is only able to finance this deficit because of large inflow of foreign funds in form of foreign institutional investment and foreign direct investment. Understood? So India has to depend on capital flows to compensate this trade deficit, and that is why India's dependence on these capital inflows makes India a vulnerable country, because whenever rupee value it sharply depreciates, it leads to erosion in the value of foreign assets in India. Therefore, these foreign investors, they become very cautious of whether or not to pull out their investments from India. And as the article highlights, if RBI is not going to control this depreciation of Indian rupee, eventually all the investors from India will take out their investments and go to other countries, which will further depreciate Indian rupee. So that is why now is the right time for RBI to intervene in the market and control the depreciation of rupee. Otherwise, it will be too late, because if RBI would want to control the depreciation 1 year from now, the cost of this and the difficulty of this control would be quite high. Understood the gist of today's article? So this is what today's article talks about, the dilemma of RBI vis-a-vis controlling the depreciation of Indian rupee. Now let us solve this practice question. Consider the following statements regarding rupee exchange rate vis-a-vis US dollar. The increase in exchange rate, that is from 80 to 85 US dollar, this is just an example, it indicates depreciation of Indian rupee. Yes, this is correct. Actually, when the per value or per dollar you are required to shell out more rupees, this indicates that your value of your own rupees is going down. The second statement, the exchange rate of Indian rupee, it is solely determined by RBI through direct intervention in the foreign exchange market. This was earlier the case before 1991, but from 1991 what we have seen that the value of rupee vis-a-vis dollar, or for that matter any currency, it depends on the market forces of demand and supply, not on RBI's intervention. RBI only intervenes to prevent volatility, not to control the overall exchange rate. Understood? So second statement incorrect, first was right. We have to identify correct statement. First is the right answer, option A. Yes, Divyansh, yes, FTY, you are right. Good evening, Karthik. Now let us move to the next article. This article actually appeared yesterday in newspaper, but as we had many articles yesterday, so I decided to skip it. Now I am taking it so as to ensure nothing is left behind. Now this article talks about that the Supreme Court of India has asked states to reconsider or consider eligible cases which are there for remission. So what is this remission? Let us try to find out. Now recently Supreme Court of India has ruled that appropriate governments, they must proactively consider the premature release of eligible convicts under their respective remission policies. So in that regard, we need to first of all understand what is this remission is all about. Now before understanding remission, let us talk about the pardoning powers of President, which is given in under the Article 72 of the Indian Constitution. Now there are particularly 5 powers of pardoning powers of President, first of which is a power to pardon, which completely absolves any convict from all the sentences and disqualifications associated with it. For example, if a prisoner, they are having death sentence or they are having a life sentence, and if that prisoner is pardoned by the President, then their sentence ends there itself, that they will not be hanged and they will not be required to stay in the jail for the remainder of their time. They will be released and they will become scot-free. So this is what pardon means. Now second is called as commutation, which substitutes a punishment with a lighter form. So for example, if a convict is under the has been sentenced to death by hanging. So if that person is commuted by the President, then that death penalty becomes a life imprisonment or a imprisonment. Understood? So when the quality of the sentences or this severity of the sentences, it reduces, that is called as commutation. Understood? Now the third is remission, which reduces the sentence without changing the nature of the nature of the punishment. For example, if a convict has been given the sentence of a strict jail or strict jail term for 10 years. So if we keep the strictest jail term intact, but we reduce the sentence from 10 years to 5 years, that is an example of remission. Understood? Now another one is called respite. Now this is actually given to a particular convict in special circumstances. For example, if a woman, she is facing some kind of a disease, or if she is pregnant, so her or his or her sentencing might be reduced for some reason or a special reason, that is called as respite. And reprieve is actually a temporary stay in execution of the sentence. For example, if a convict has been given a death penalty and the date has come out when that convict will be hanged, but that convict will go to different courts in the country. So for that, temporary reliefs are provided, which is called reprieve. Understood? Now today's article is about remission, that is, which reduces the duration of the sentences without changing its nature. So severe imprisonments for 10 years, if it is reduced to 8 years, 7 years, 5 years, etc., these are examples of remission. Now the Supreme Court, in his judgment, they have highlighted that it should be mandatory considered by the state government whether or not to give any prisoner the policy of remission. Now section 432 of the CRPC, it actually empowers appropriate governments, that is state or union government, to suspend or remit a sentence of a convict either wholly or partially. Now this was replaced by section 473 of the BNSS, which has replaced this section 432 of CRPC, which highlights the same provision. Now if the government has a policy under section 432 of CRPC or section 473 of BNSS, it must consider that all eligible convicts for premature release. So there should be no distinction in this regard, and authorities, they cannot wait for the convict to file the application for seeking remissions themselves. Rather, they should automatically give the remission if the convict is eligible to get remission. Understood? This is what the Supreme Court is saying. Also, the Supreme Court says that the states and union territory government who do not have an actual or a remission policy, they should actually formulate these policies under the section 473 of BNS. Therefore, they should come with such policies in a month or two time period. Also, the decision making whether or not to give the commutation or not, these orders of granting or rejecting the remission must be clear, and the reasons for granting or rejecting the remission should be clearly communicated to the convict so that they can undertake their further judicial recourse. And prison authorities, they must inform the convicts of their right to challenge such rejections if they want to pursue this matter in higher courts of the country. Understood? Now, there are related cases of Supreme Court judgments where the Supreme Court has dealt with the issue of remittances, of remissions. Now, there was this Mafta Bhai Moti Bhai Sagar versus State of Gujarat 2024, and in this judgment, the Supreme Court ruled that the order granting the permanent remission, it cannot be withdrawn or cancelled without first providing the convict the opportunity for them to be heard. So, this is just principle of natural justice, that you cannot change the sentences without giving the accused or the convict the opportunity to be heard. Also, the state of Haryana versus Mahendra Singh and others 2007, in this judgment the Supreme Court highlighted that while the convicts, they do not possess the fundamental right to get remission, that it is not their fundamental right to seek remission, however they are legally entitled for their case to be considered for remission. That is, there should be an opportunity given to the prisoners or the convict so that they can get their sentences remitted. Understood? So, it is not a fundamental right, rather a legal right. Understood? Now, let us move to next article of the day. This article actually appeared in yesterday's explain section, and this article highlights that a kayak of Venezuela, who was just a 23-year-old kayak, he was briefly engulfed by a humpback whale while kayaking through the Strait of Magellan. Now, for this article, what becomes important is that humpback whale and also this location where this incident happened, that is Strait of Magellan. So, first let us understand where is this Strait of Magellan located. Now, if you go southwards from the South American continent, just below or just on the tip of the southern tip of the South American continent, you will see that there is a thin passage of line, and this thin passage of line is what considered as Strait of Magellan. It is between Argentina here and Chile here. Okay. Now, what did why did actually the whale engulf the kayaker first of all? Now, humpback whale, they often charge the surface with their open mouth so as to catch prey like ships, fishes, etc. And it is likely that the whale was not able to detect the kayak because of cloudy conditions, or that the kayak itself, it makes minimal noises. So, that is why humpback whales, they primarily rely on hearing, and small and motorless vehicles like kayak, they produce very little sound. So, that is why this kind of an incident eventually happened. Now, what becomes important is that what are the different types of whale. First type of whale are known as baleen whales. There are 14 species of it. For example, blue whales, humpback whales, grey whales, etc. These are baleen whales. Now, the feeding mechanism of these whales are that they have baleen plates inside their teeth, which the whales use to filter out and feed the small prey like krills and fish, and their throat size is most small, about the size of a human fish, that it is impossible for them to engulf an entire human being. Now, the other type of whales, these are known as tooth whales, and there are over 70 species of these kind of whales. For example, sperm whales, beak whales, killer whales, dolphins, etc. All of these are tooth whales. Now, the feeding mechanism is that they have teeth and hunt larger prey like fishes and squid. Now, the throat size, although it is larger than baleen whales, however, it still can't swallow a human being except for sperm whales. Understood? So, if the whale comes and they are engulfing a human being, that must be sperm whales. But it is estimated that for a human being to encounter a sperm whale, it is a very less probability event. So, it is 1 in a million chance that a human being will ever come across a sperm whale. So, theoretically, the chances of a human being being engulfed by a sperm whale, it is very less. Understood? Now, as I tell you every day, you have an opportunity to register for courses that are available on StudyIQ's website. Now, we provide you with Sampoorn batch. This batch provides you with the entire foundational level knowledge, which provides you with study material, which provides you with classes for all the subjects, and also the test series for both prelims and mains, in addition to 24/7 mentorship support. Now, such kind of a batches or the courses, these are available at a very reasonable rate. Right now, if you can see the website, if I take you to the website here, sorry, incorrect website, StudyIQ. Now, if you take a look at the website, it says UPSC Foundation P2I Live batches. Now, if you click on the batches, you will see that currently admissions are going on for batch 2 for both 2026 and 27 because batch 1 has been filled entirely. Now, if you want to get yourself registered for 2026 course, please do not delay it. Click on the batch 2 tile here and it will take you to the course, and it says that you are required to pay 37,499. Now, for this kind of a course, this course money is actually very reasonable. But what if I tell you, you can get it for even less amount? Click on buy now. I'll tell you how. You can add the promo code here, and once you are required to enter a coupon code. For that, add ATS live, the same code which is flashing on the bottom half of your screen right now. Click on ATS live, sorry, ATS live and click apply. Now see the value of your course, it was earlier 37,499, now it has reduced to 29,999. Okay, and for gold also you will be required to pay 1999, and for silver just 9,999. So that is how you can apply the code ATS live to get discounts on all the courses that are available on StudyIQ website. Please save your hard-earned money or your parents' hard-earned money and use it productively for your study-related purposes. Understood? Now let us go back to our discussion. The next article of the day, which is the last article of the day, it is actually about India's relationship with Qatar, because today's newspaper, both on explain section and on editorial page, there was this mention of the recent visit of Emir of Qatar, which resulted into the slew of agreements between these two countries. Now, India and Qatar, they have actually elevated their bilateral ties to strategic partnership during the state visit of Emir of Qatar. Now, Qatar, it is actually an uniquely important player in the region of Middle East, which is a very disturbed region, as you already know. Now, raising the Indo-Qatar relationship to a strategic partnership, it indicates that the bilateral ties between these two countries, they are quite healthy, and this signals that there is a further scope for future elevation. As you can understand, there were many Indian nationals who were sentenced to death in Qatar, but after the intervention of PM Modi and the Emir of Qatar, Qatar actually released these people. So this highlights the relationship between these two countries. They are so comfortable that the concerns of the people living in different countries, they were actively considered by the one country. Understood? Now let us understand first of all the geopolitical and strategic importance of Qatar. Now Qatar, as I've told you, is a key player in the Gulf and Middle Eastern region, specifically because of the fact whether it's an Iran-Saudi conflict or is it an Israel-Palestinian conflict, every of these parties, they rely on Qatar to mediate. As we have seen in Israel-Palestinian conflict also, both Israeli and Palestinian representatives, they actually traveled to Qatar so as to negotiate with each other the terms of ceasefire and terms of release of prisoners. So this is what the crucial role that Qatar has played in recent times. And Qatar also played a key role in getting US and Taliban together so that US could leave Afghanistan and Taliban could eventually govern the Afghani territory. So this highlights that in every conflict in the region, what is constant is that Qatar becomes a mediator, and India wants to leverage this very potential of Qatar so as to make its relationship with all the Middle Eastern countries quite comfortable and natural. And that is why such relationships has significance for India. First of all, it ensures that India's strategic interest in the Middle East, it is taken care of. India has good relations with almost all the countries in Middle East, and if any conflict between these countries themselves happen, it puts India into a tough spot whether to favor one country or another, and no country like India would want to favor or want to piss off another country, right? So that is why it wants its relationship with every country to go smooth, and for that it can rely on a partner like Qatar, which plays the role of a mediator quite frequently. Amar, main already in a platinum batch, good. Now, this Indian relationship with Qatar, it facilitates energy security, trade routes through Gulf. Now, these kind of Middle East in general, it is an energy-rich region. It provides world with the supplies of crude oil, natural gas, and Qatar has the largest reserve in the world for natural gas. So, naturally, when India is depending on Qatar for imports of large number of natural gas, India actually depends on Qatar to meet its energy security requirements, and also it can provide support for international negotiations on security issue. What is the major security issue that bothers India? It is the issue of terrorism. And naturally, the terrorism which is emanating from countries like Pakistan and Afghanistan in the past, these can be tackled with actual interventions by mediators like Qatar. So that is why India wants to rely more on Qatar in order to navigate the minefield of a region of Middle East, and also to take care of its security and energy interest in the region. Also, let us understand the various areas of cooperation between India and Qatar. First is the region of trade and economic cooperation. Now, currently the bilateral trade between these two countries, it is $14 billion, and by the agreement that was signed by PM Modi and Emir of Qatar, it was agreed that we need to double this amount of trade in the next 5 years by 2030 or so, to the levels of $28 billion. Now, the major exports from India into Qatar are machinery, food products like rice, automobiles, electronics, whereas on the other hand, Qatar imports into India products like liquefied natural gas, petrochemicals, fertilizers and plastics. And you understand this petrochemicals and liquefied natural gas, it is very much desired in India, because India is actually import dependent to meet the demands or to meet the domestic demands for these items. Now, Qatar, it actually supplies over 40% of India's LNG needs, and India is actually Qatar's third largest export destination for LNG after China and US. Understood? Also, in the field of trade and economic cooperation, Qatar is actually a source of foreign direct investment, because the sovereign investment authority of Qatar, known as Qatar Investment Authority or QIA, it has invested about $1.5 billion in India in different sectors like retail, affordable housing, power sector, and also in fields of education and health. Now, new investment commitment has been made by QIA, that is, it will invest, or it plans to invest about $10 billion, which was announced back in February 2025, and it will make investments in infrastructure, port, shipbuilding, and also in emerging technologies like AI and robotics. Now, when it comes to labor and diaspora cooperation, Indian community in Qatar, it stretches to about 8 lakh people. The total population is around 25 lakh. So, almost 1/3 of it is Indian workers. Now, Indian workers, they contribute largely to Qatar's economy, right from laborers to engineers. In all sections of the society, Indians, they find their presence in. Now, also in the field of defense and security cooperation, although it is quite nascent as compared to other countries like Saudi and UAE, however, now India and Qatar, they want to strengthen their defense relationship, and for that you can understand a navy ship known as INS Kolkata, it participated in the Doha International Maritime Defense Exhibition, that is DIMEX. Also, in the field of education and research exchanges, you can understand the collaboration has happened between Qatari universities in the field of research and development and premier institutes in India. For example, IIT Delhi, it is exploring a joint AI research with the Qatar Foundation, which was actually the sponsor of Barcelona. So, this is how the different fields, away from even trade and commerce, we have seen Indian and Qatar cooperation, they are extending now through the fields of defense and security, and also in the fields of education and research. So, this is the potential of the relationship, that is away from the traditional domains and also into the newer domains of technology and research. Now, let us understand the challenges that the Indo and Qatar relationship faces. First of all, you have to understand India is quite dependent on Qatar to meet its LNG requirements, and in case the prices of LNG increases or there is a disruption in the supply of LNG from that volatile Middle Eastern region, it will put India into a deep danger. Understood? So, this is how India would want to primarily reduce its dependence and also ensure that the supplies of the gases from Qatar, they are made on a very reasonable terms for India. Also, labor and migrant workers, they continuously face issues in the region of Middle East, although they go by, or if they want to get income from these countries and they go. However, what they face is that the working conditions, their living conditions, the amount of discrimination that they face from locals, it puts them into a very discomfortable zone, and that is why these kind of migrant workers issues have been prominently highlighted for the countries in Middle East, and Qatar is also not an exception to this trend. Further, you can understand Qatar had a love-hate relationship with its Gulf neighbors. As we have understood in the past, Saudi and UAE, they got together and tried to isolate Qatar because Qatar became too close to the adversary of Saudis and UAE, that is Iran. And this love-hate relationship of Qatar with its Gulf neighbors actually puts India into a very tricky situation, because India on one hand has had very good relations with Saudi and UAE, and it wants to increase its relationship with Qatar. But when Qatar is engaged in a verbal or a diplomatic tussle with these countries, India will have to balance its relationship with these nations. Also, India, although Qatar Investment Authority has promised that it will invest about $10 billion in India, but you have to understand, investment in India faces many regulatory barriers. So there is a possibility that if India does not do away with the regulatory barriers, the investment in general might not materialize. And another cause of concern for India is the burgeoning trade deficit, because you understand, India imports more from Qatar than Qatar imports from India. So naturally, India's trade with Qatar is in a deficit with respect to India, because India imports large quantities of LNG. And if India's exports to Qatar, they do not exist or they do not increase, it will increase this trade deficit further. Also, the defense and strategic cooperation, it is actually quite limited, as India has only now begun to enmesh itself with the Qatari defense cooperation, and that is why this is a very starting phase of the defense cooperation between these two countries, and this is what the challenges between the relationship of two countries faces. So in that regard, let us try to understand how to better the relations and how the future roadmap of relations between these two countries should be like. Now, first of all, we have to expand the bilateral trade and investment between these two countries, and for that bilateral trade to exist, we have to ensure that India exports more products to Qatar so as to balance its trade deficit in general. And also, India has to enhance its energy security, and first of all, it should ensure that the long-term contracts for the import of LNG should be signed, and it should be signed at a very reasonable rates for India, so as that India can continue importing the LNG from Qatar. However, it could do so at a very user and reasonable rates. Also, there is a need to expand the horizons in the space cooperation, because you understand, India is a major player in the space sector now just because of the technological developments of ISRO, and it can actually help the Qatari space organization so as to send satellites that it develop into space, because India has had a very good track record of sending these satellites into space. So this space cooperation can be the new areas of cooperation between these two countries, and this should be actually harnessed by the leaders of these two countries. And also, we need to promote people to people ties, as we have seen that the concerns of Indian citizens in Qatar, it was taken care of, as Qatar Emir decided to pardon these prisoners and send them back to India, and this highlights that the people to people ties can be improved. Also, Qatari government can ensure that the laborers who are working in Qatar, particularly Indian citizens, their rights are taken care of, their salaries are provided to them, and their living conditions can be made better, so as that it leads to the overall cooperation between these two countries. And also, advancing the regional and strategic cooperation is important, because as I told you, this region is a geopolitical minefield, and you need a stabilized and steady partner for you to navigate the minefield of the region and also have a better relations with other countries. And for that, even India can play a key role, so that for Qatar, it becomes easier for it to navigate its relationship with countries like Saudi and UAE, as India has good relationship with them. So India can put an actually a good word for Qatar with these two countries. Understood? So this is how our today's discussion will end. Please try to solve this question. Please divide this question into the usual three forms: introduction, body and conclusion, and please use the conclusion in a positive manner. Do not end your answer with a negative tone, as it does not look good. Okay. Now, there are late joinees: Saujanya, Narsimha, good evening; Aditya, good evening. Now, the notes for this session will be available on my Telegram channel, ATS Live, and you can please make sure to help your fellow aspirants in reviewing their answer and suggesting them the valuable feedback which can be given by you. This is the question for today, which can be your homework also. I will take up this question before the discussion of tomorrow's session. Understood? So with this, I will end the today's session. Please, thank you for watching, and do not forget to hit the like button, as it helps our content reach more people, and let us know in the comments after this video ends whether you like this video or not. Okay, so I'll see you again tomorrow at 4. Until then, please have a very good evening and good night.